Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a special edition of Popcorn and Compliance. As you know from prior episodes, Megan Dougherty, co-founder of One Stone Creative, and I are huge MCU fans. So we've decided to do the MCU movie oeuvre. That's right. We're going to do all of the MCU movies in this special podcast series. Over this series, we will take a look at the storylines, some of the cookies and other cool things. We'll describe the great action scenes from each episode, and then we'll take a look at issues raised by each episode. It's going to be a lot of fun. We will take things from the societal angle, from the social justice angle, from the MCU angle, and perhaps even from the compliance angle. But if you're an MCU fan or you're a compliance fan, I know you will enjoy this episode. We take up Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Popcorn and Compliance, the MCU series, is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again with Megan Dougherty for our continued exploration of all things MCU. As our listeners know, we are back with the MCU Challenge, and that challenge is to go through the entire MCU universe on Popcorn and Compliance. Why? Well, not only because it's there, but because we're MCU uber geek fans. We are reviewing these movies in chronological order, not by release date. So today we continue with Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Megan, you said when we reviewed Guardians of the Galaxy 1, you really enjoyed it more on this reviewing for this podcast series. Did you feel the same about number 2?
I did. I definitely did. It's sort of like happens with the other MCU movies and series. I really feel a lot more like I know these people this time, and I was really invested in seeing what happened to them next, even though I technically knew. In fact, when I finished, I was so excited to keep kind of having story with them. I started watching Infinity War just so I could see when they kind of formed up with the rest of the team. But yeah, I thought it's a delightful movie to rewatch. It's always kind of fun when something that may not seem like the best or the most enjoyable the first time around actually does get a lot better on second and possibly third or fourth viewings. What about yourself?
Let me take everything you said, put it on steroids, and take it exponentially further. Because of all the MCU movies, I disliked the first viewing. This was probably number 1. I didn't understand Ego. Mm-hmm. I couldn't fit it into what was going on. I didn't really understand the character, but I did this time. And I really, really enjoyed it. And actually, I enjoyed it on a much deeper level than simply the action movie in many ways that I saw in Guardian of the Galaxies 1. I heard a lot of philosophy. I saw a lot of family dynamics. I saw, and let me kind of jump ahead to one of the plot themes I want to talk about, and that's the Sovereign and the people, the Sovereign, and they're headed by a character named the Sovereign, who happens to be a woman, and they think they are just the cat's meow, and they treat everybody else who's not them, not like the cat's meow. And it's not clear to me why they think they're so great, but they're like every snob I've ever met. And they're very good looking snobs. I'll give them that. And they're all in gold. And of course that brings up, Goldfinger for me. But here's the thing I wanted to focus on, and it's almost philosophical. At one point they steal some batteries, which is the basis of the planet's wealth of these very special batteries. And the Guardians steal some batteries, and the Sovereigns go after them. And they go after them with their fleet of ships. But their fleet of ships are remote drones. And when a ship is disabled, the drone pilot, who's basically running a computer monitor, stands up and leaves their computer monitor, and that means they're dead. And it struck me, Megan, that when I saw that, the reason the Sovereigns have such an unrealistic view of themselves in reality is that they have reduced the horror of war to a video game, literally. And they do not understand that war is horrible. It is messy. People die. Planets are destroyed. You lose loved ones. All the things that make people not want to go to war, they have removed. And there was an episode from Star Trek where that had happened. And in that movie, or that episode rather, they had reduced warfare between two planets to computer simulations. And if you died, you were reported to a disintegration chamber. And that was it. You did physically die, but there was nothing else and no damage to a planet. And it really struck me that by reducing the horrors of some of the things that you and I would call humanity, even if they're negative, to a game or to a video console, you really lose that connection. And I don't know if my mind spiraled out away from there, but it seemed to me that was one of the reasons they were so unrealistic in how they viewed themselves and others, is they'd reduced everything to not really, a pleasure planet sort of situation, but a planet where they thought they were better than the rest of the galaxy, and they didn't understand and really treated everyone else like that. So that was, I saw that kind of philosophy throughout this, and that kind of philosophical bend also extended to Ego, the Kurt Russell character, who is the father of Peter Quill. And that whole scene where they go to the planet, there was a lot of foundational Greek myths in that, and also a lot of philosophy. If you want to go down the religion belt, you can do that too. But Ego said he traversed the galaxy not realizing what he was, and then finally at some point he achieved consciousness, and as in a brain. And then after he achieved consciousness, he was able to form a corporeal body. And that's almost straight out of Genesis. A little different, but almost straight. And so I really saw that level and appreciated the movie in a very different way than I did not appreciate the first time, but also almost in a different way than really any other movie in the MCU. We have seen characters have growth. We have seen characters have origins and tie what they do today to what they happened to them as children, or how they were brought up, or in Bucky Barnes' case, what happened to him to become the Winter Soldier. But I really saw a level of philosophy here that I really, really enjoyed, which I was not expecting on this time around. And I've droned on now for quite a while. So
it's been interesting.
What did you see in this movie? Was it anything close to what I saw, or did you see it for the kind of fun story it was?
Well, I didn't get quite as deep into the philosophy as I think you did. The one that really got me is similar to the last one, but even more so was family. Yeah, and it started right at the beginning with the team fighting the battery stealing squid monster. While Groot's having his little hangout and dance at the front, and everyone's taking care of him. And so after adult Groot's self-sacrifice at the end of the last movie, they've all kind of become co-parents to this little baby tree in a really charming way. And his relationship, the Groot's relationship with the rest of the team, changes and deepens over the rest of the movie too. I just thought that was really, really charming. Particularly his connection with Quill, how that changed, and Quill, having finally found his own fathers, started to become a better one to Groot, which was pretty great. And that I think was one of my favorite subplots, was kind of the revelation of who Yondu really was as a character. Because he seems like, the leader of the pirates at first, and he's really tough and he's really mean. But he realized he had been terribly misled about all of the children he was ferrying to Ego. And he saved little Peter and raised him as his own, not treating him particularly nicely. But he did, prevent him from having a much worse death. And watching that kind of come to fruition over the movie, and then Peter realizing what had happened. That was pretty touching all around.
That brings up another level that I had not thought about when I first saw the movie. At some point, there's a mutiny on the Ravager's ship, and Quill is overthrown, and his first mate is part of the mutiny, but the mutiny very quickly spirals out of control to the point where all of the supporters of Quill are thrown out an airlock. And there's a pretty poignant scene where one is thrown out, and you see the graveyard of all of those who've been thrown out. And it really drove home for me just how tenuous being a pirate could be. Mm-hmm. Things could flip immediately. No honor among thieves. And when there was a character called Taserface who was kind of leading the rebels, they may be great fighters and they may be great debauchers, but nobody could lead them, and they didn't have a leader. And Quill did and could lead them, and they were really lost without Quill. And yeah, they overthrew him, but then they didn't know what to do next.
Well, I thought it's interesting you say there was no honor amongst thieves, because I think that was I thought the fact that there was this honor and this code among the different Ravager factions that caused Yondo and Quill's faction to be kind of ousted from it was one of the interesting ways to go about it. And then
that really was, but I have to say I was so overwhelmed by seeing Sylvester Stallone in that role as the head of the Ravagers. And I had completely forgotten he was in this movie. And, you want to take it all the way then and tie it to the very end about the funeral scene and explain that, because I found that incredibly poignant too. We'll be right back with more on Guardians of the Galaxy 2 after this quick message from our sponsor.
I do too. And I think, what is it with the MCU and these gorgeous, heart-wrenching funerals? Because, man, they are not pulling any punches with it. But when all the different Ravager factions came back to honor the death of Yondo, who thought he was still an exile and would never kind of, reach the afterlife or have the honor kind of that is traditional among these, we don't deal in kids pirates. Seeing everyone come back and release the fireworks and watch his body kind of disintegrate and go into space, it was such a lovely goodbye and such a nice way to wrap up and legitimize the fact that while he did wrong, he did also do penance. And ultimately changed his ways and then was finally rewarded for it. So I thought that was just one visually beautiful, but also quite emotionally touching.
In terms of cookies, any cookies that really stood out for you?
For a lot of this movie and a lot of the last one, I just wrote down things I found hilarious. The way Peter Quill talked about movies and TV shows as if they were Earth legends was just consistently funny. And the way the rest of the Guardians constantly misunderstood them and how they work. I wrote that one of my favorite, I think, was Zarbu Hasselfrau and his magical talking boat for David Hasselhoff and Knight Rider was brilliant. And I thought that the tech was really cool. And the way they were visually demonstrating the tech, so like the little pads that you'd stick on that became, a mask or a flight suit or a space suit. And I just had down, Iron Man is dreaming of this tech. And, on Earth also kind of developing it in a silo with the nanotech for the Iron Man suit. And then pretty much any time Mantis and Drax were engaging in conversation, I found catastrophically funny.
Drax was, I don't want to say revelation, because we obviously met him in Guardians 1, but the humor he brought and the humor they allowed him to Dave Bautista, the actor, to bring, and he played it perfectly. It was a complete straight man, and he played it as if he didn't know he was being funny, and it made it even more funny. And here we have this big, bulking behemoth with, arm muscles as big as our thighs. And he's playing this straight man, and he's doing it perfectly. And I just love that sort of development of his character. And then the other character that really I had not fully appreciated until I rewatched this movie was Mantis. I had forgotten that she was a slave. I had thought she was like, executive assistant or something on Planet Eco. But she was a slave, and she was there to calm Ego's mind so that he could go to sleep, which is her skill as an empath. And she is able to use that skill to help them not only save their lives, but also escape. And of course, we're going to see her later. But I really felt like the scenes with her, particularly the early scenes, were very poignant, because even when she wanted to escape, she still had that kind of slave mentality that I'm a slave and he's the boss, and I can't double cross him, kind of thing. So that was really also a great character for me. Anything else along those lines?
Oh, let's see. The relationship between Rocket and Yondo was pretty great, and how they really saw themselves in each other, and really kind of came to acknowledge the difficulty they have with interpersonal intimacy. They were pretty, like, it was almost, it felt like a therapy setting, the way they were really getting through to each other, and really, being self-aware about these lacks that they might have or have had, and then kind of moving forward past them. I thought was really lovely for like this tiny genetically modified raccoon that is just ravenous for violence, in a hysterical fashion.
It really was. We both enjoyed, or actually we loved, the music from Guardians of the Galaxy 1. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to also maybe bring up the music here. It was had a little bit different focus, Megan, I thought, because it wasn't just feel-good music. We had things as diverse as Glenn Campbell with Southern Nights, George Harrison with My Sweet Lord, and Fleetwood Mac with The Chain. But were there any songs from this soundtrack that really spoke to you?
The Chain, Fleetwood Mac, one of my all-time favorite bands. So hearing that towards the beginning and then again towards the end, I thought was fantastic. And the way they used the same song twice was really, really effective. And I like the Brandy or Fine Girl, I think is it's called. And so the way first it was a song that was being enjoyed, and then the lyrics were kind of being twisted by Ego to explain and justify his actions. I thought was a really nice use for a piece of music. So those were the two that caught out to me. I wish there'd been a little more Fleetwood Mac, but I always wish there had been a little more Fleetwood Mac. So that's just the way it is.
So I hope this doesn't destroy what little street cred I have, but I have always loved Brandy. It's one of my favorite songs. It was favorite when it came out, and it's favorite now. So I hope my daughter's not listening, because I know I'll lose all street cred with her if I reveal that. But it actually worked for me in the way he did it, even with the way he manipulated it. Because I often think of, I love science fiction movies, and I love movies about space travel. And I think of people in space to the 16th or 17th century or 18th century sailors crossing the ocean, where it was just as big an unknown. It was just as big. Your chances of death were just as great. And, I look at astronauts in many ways as a modern sailor. And so my life, my love, and my lady is the sea. And my dad was a naval officer, so I had a resonation with him. And they're men, I suppose women too, that, they love the sea and they love the open sea. And there's going to be those who are going to feel the same way about space. So I really found that poignant. And then the second one, though, is Father and Son by Cat Stevens. And for any boy who's had difficulty with their father, and that's all of us, that song is just absolutely spot on. And other than Harry Chapin's Cat in the Cradle, I really can't think of another song that would mean more to a son than Cat Stevens' Father and Son. So at the end, that was really, really poignant to me.
When he shares with Groot.
But once again, yeah, once again, the soundtrack was just fabulous. And because of the revelation of Guardians 1 and the way they use that music in the soundtrack, it wasn't as big a revelation, but I absolutely enjoyed the music just as much in this one.
No, I did too. And well, as you mentioned at the top, there is going to be a Guardians 3 coming out next year, which is extremely exciting. And we don't have to say goodbye to them for the MCU because they're going to be joining everyone just a few movies from now. So we will get to visit with them again, which I'm looking forward to.
Well, this is Tom Fox, and I hope you've enjoyed exploring the MCU with Megan Dougherty and myself in this episode of Popcorn and Compliance. And I hope you will join us where in the next episode we take up Avengers Age of Ultron. Thanks so much for joining, and Megan, I can't wait.
Until next time.
This is Tom Fox again. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Popcorn and Compliance, the MCU series. I hope you will join Megan and I next time where we take up the Age of Ultron. Also, I'd like to tell you about a special podcast series that recently premiered on the Compliance Podcast Network. Trial of the Century, the Enron Trial, where with business journalist Lauren Steffi, who covered the Enron trial, we take a look at the trial of Enron as opposed to the bankruptcy. I know you'll enjoy it if you like fraud, if you like trials, or you just like a good story. Check it out on the Compliance Podcast Network.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.